So, yeah, it's been quite the Star Trek month of controversy for my channel as of late. And apparently I can't escape it without having to make some comment on the question on everyone's mind. I mean, I've just had an interview on the controversy behind it. I had a pretty colourful argument on my channel over how progressive Star Trek is meant to be and why. And notwithstanding an assault of degradation from the Axanar fans, despite having made clear that I have nothing against the film itself or the idea of Alec actually finishing it, what did I actually think of Prelude to Axanar as a film? I liked it. Look, Star Trek fans, you do know that the controversy concerning the 13th Doctor being woman has more or less died down by now, don't you? Donald Trump has incited a race war and called Nazis good guys. And we could be at war with Korea sometime soon. I mean, at this point, considering everything else going on in the world, one could argue that you've just become the equivalent of the old man who just got angry at a cloud. So, what really happened at Axanar? That's been a point in history that has been made the centre of some controversy as of late, especially thanks to this fan film. Oh, that is by no means a bad thing. The discussion of Star Trek lore is a very healthy thing. Obsession to perceived canon, however, well, that's a debate for another time. Suffice to say, short of the brief mention to the event in the original Star Trek episode To Whom Gods Destroy, very little more is mentioned of it in established canon. Probably due to the fact that the episode is already an entry in part of the already maligned Season 3. But, you know, fans, or at least the obsessed, more hardcore element of fans, no loose ends. But we'll be reviewing Whom Gods Destroy in time. But let's get back to where that episode fits into all of this. Whom Gods Destroy introduced Garth of Izar, legendary captain and hero of the Battle of Axanar, who was required reading in the Academy and personal hero of Captain James T. Kirk. That was until he tried to commit genocide on the peaceful people of Antanos, who saved his life by teaching him how to heal himself by altering his molecular state. It was perhaps this very lack of gratitude that had his crew mutiny, him stripped of command and exiled into a facility for the criminally insane. Well, that and the fact that the people of Antos 4 also refused his offer to join him in conquering the galaxy. Which is a shame, as he was the finest captain of his age, the finest student of the Academy, the very pinnacle of officer every Starfleet captain aspired to become. As much as he was the pride of Starfleet, he eventually became its greatest shame, a Caligula in his own mind and self-proclaimed Lord of the Universe. Whilst he did lose his sanity, he certainly didn't lose any of his cunning or abilities, and eventually took over the asylum in which he was incarcerated. He then took to kidnapping James Kirk and used every tool at his disposal, including murder, to assume Captain James T. Kirk's form and take over the Enterprise and hunt down the crew that betrayed him at Antos 4. Garth's final gambit, once again assuming Kirk's visage, in the hopes of confusing his first officer, was unable to prevent Spock's eventual identification of his true captain. Garth was eventually subdued, and his followers were returned to their confinement. Corey and Dr. McCoy then began to administer a new drug therapy to the asylum's patients with some optimism. Before the Enterprise departed, Kirk was at last able to catch a glimpse of the hero in his youth. With the help of the new medicine originally intended for the patients of the asylum, Garth seemed to be emerging out of a fog. Somewhat bewildered, Kirk identified himself, and the name meant nothing to Garth. But the words starship and captain appeared to sink in, and clearly they held meaning. Garth, with respect, raised his hand to shake Kirk's. So yeah, that's it. Other than being a fairly decent episode from the much maligned Season 3 of the TOS era, Axanar got nothing more than a brief mention. No one actually knows to what battle this is actually referring, only that it was 20 years before Kirk. No information on who the enemy was or what was involved, only that the battle was at Axanar. You'd think it would be left as it was, a mere footnote in Star Trek history, not really worth talking about, to save them being mentioned as a runaway line in the script. Well, trust the fans not to miss it. I mean, seriously, we are talking about a faction of fans that could tell you the average speed of a TOS turbo lift door, or argue with you that the doors are more of a shh than a shuft.
How would you handle this?
We could try ignoring it, sir.
I see. Pretend nothing has happened and hope everything turns out all right in the morning.
Just a thought, sir.
I've considered that. There's got to be a better angle.
So the question again is raised, not by myself, but by other fans who insist on knowing, what exactly happened at Axanar? Well, according to my sources, of which there are many different opinions, some speculate that it was an encounter with the Romulans, though the episode Balance of Terror debunks that theory by pointing out that no contact with the Romulans has been made in the last 100 years since the creation of the Neutral Zone, which was established by a treaty made with the equivalent of a faceless telephone call. And as Axanar was 20 years before Kirk, this can immediately be ruled out. The FASA sourcebook, The 4 Years' War, says that the battle was fought between the Federation fleet led by the Garth of Izar commanding the USS Xenophon and the Klingon invasion war, and was the start of the conflict known as the 4 Years' War, rather than the conclusion of it. According to the novel Garth of Izar, the battle was fought between the USS Heisenberg commanded by Garth of Izar and a single Klingon warship. It occurred in 2251. According to Star Trek the original series core game rulebook, the Axanar Rebellion was a conflict between the Federation and the Axanari. The Axanari were offended by the suggestion that their application for the Federation membership should be rejected because of some inferior starships, that they responded by conquering several planets and presenting them as a gift to the Federation. Say what you like about these Axanari pricks, but they certainly know how to make a point. The Federation demanded that the Axanari immediately withdraw from their conquered planets, which angered them even more, and Garth of Izar commanded the USS Constitution during the conflict, and the Federation was able to win despite the Axanari fleet being numerically superior. According to the book Star Trek Federation, the first 150 years, the battle was fought between the USS Constitution commanded by Garth of Izar and 3 Klingon warships.
Great continuity!
All very useful and contradictory, I'm sure you'll agree. I can go so far as to say that some, if not likely all of the above, is wrong to some varying degree. And I would also argue that it doesn't matter until CBS and Paramount decide to make something official of it. And despite Alex Peters' claims, I can assure you Discovery will more than likely not be covering the Axanar incident as a foundation for its show. I certainly see no evidence to support that accusation in any event. So, we're going to go with the runaway line on a script for plot convenience, right? Fine, fanboys, let's be that way. Star Trek New Voyages, known back then as Phase 2 between 2008 and 2015, was a fan film series written to continue the voyages of Kirk and the Enterprise following Season 3. Alongside the more recent Star Trek Continues, New Voyages remains one of the most popular Star Trek fan film series since its first episode come what may in 2004. But the show itself is not really the focus here. But fast forwarding to 2010, where actor Alec Peters first donned the role of Captain Garth in the as yet unreleased Star Trek Origins episode The Protracted Man. He would later return for the vignette Going Boldly. Now, 2 very short appearances, yes, but a role, nonetheless, that would define Alec Peters' future for the next 7 years, and it seems quite possibly beyond. You see, in 2012, Alec Peters announced on the Star Trek BBS his intent to create a 75-minute feature movie based on the actual events at Axanar, and in 2013 made its presence aware on IMDb as in production. After a successful Kickstarter campaign raising $100,000 over the requested $10,000, Alec, alongside Christian Gossett, completed the initial shoot for Prelude to Axanar only just in time for a showing at the San Diego Comic-Con in 2014. And I got to admit, I was impressed. Yeah, as much as this thing is laden with controversy, I can't knock the initial product. At least this preview of what never came to be. You see, Prelude to Axanar is not what a lot of people might think, a full fan film. It's what it claims to be, a prelude to the big event, a teaser of what's to come, and it does it well. Presented to us in documentary form, which I will confess I thought would be the actual product, as we are introduced to the key players in the Axanar incident, such as Ambassador Sovol, who is replaced by Enterprise actor Gary Graham, Commander Khan, played by the Battlestar Galactica veteran Richard Hamm, Admiral Marcus Ramirez, played by Tony Todd, who was made famous in Star Trek The Next Generation for playing Kurn, Worf's brother, Captain Sonia Alexander, played by Kate Vernon, who was Colonel Ty's wife from the Battlestar Galactica reboot, Admiral Samuel Travis, played by J.G. Hertzler, Martok from Deep Space Nine. And, of course, Alec Peters himself reprising his Phase 2 role as Kevlar Garth, the hero of Axanar. It's this A-list of Star Trek actors that really help give authenticity to Prelude, as they talk to the cameras candidly about the 4 Years' War, which is in this case with the Klingon Empire. As we take in the interviews from both sides of the conflict, we are drawn into a series of events in which the Federation's very stability lies in tatters. The Vulcans are thinking of seceding from the Federation as the war with the Klingon Empire threatens the very quadrant, and it's very clear that the Federation is on the losing side. And if they do, in fact, lose this war, they lose every principle they have fought so hard for the last 70 years. Peace, knowledge, and understanding. But sadly, without this war, there can be no lasting peace, and the Federation will not back down, making the Klingons have to pay for every inch of space with both blood and debris. You can feel the tension, the loss of hope. It is indeed a very dark time for the Federation. Visually, Prelude is stunning. But then I have come to expect nothing less from Tobias Richter. Though, sadly, as much as the film claims to stick to canon designs and away from the JJ-verse designs, it seems way too influenced by the JJ-verse for my liking. Now, don't get me wrong, this is exactly how I would envision a TOS reimagining if you really wanted to stay somewhat faithful to the source material. And this is way better than, well, this. But the nacelles and the main hull are just as exaggerated as the JJ versions. Now, I don't blame them for using these designs as much as I can see the comparisons, but for fans who claim this as faithful, well, you can understand that raises a lot of questions for me. But that aside, I can't fault the visuals aesthetically. It really speaks epic to you, and combined with the A-list actors in the field, it really speaks of something really special to come. Designs aside, which are stunning, don't get me wrong, the visuals are amazing, and I would have killed to have seen Tobias Richter's work on the big screen. And I have been following his work way back since the Amiga days with his raycast animations. And believe me, he has come a hell of a long way since then. It's hard for me to comment on the set pieces because, well, there are none. The framing device used here certainly takes advantage of this, successfully hiding the fact that they had green screen sets rather than the full sets they were boasting to be using for the film. Yet, considering this, the chosen documentary format was clearly a deliberate and clever choice to use for Prelude, taking advantage more of what they didn't have rather than what they did. And in many respects, despite not seeing a bridge, the blurry outlines of a station orbiting the Earth or Kronos as a virtual set piece and the actors carry the film well. And I dare say so does Alec Peters. But the important question on the so-called real fans' mind should be, is it canon friendly? Well, no. And this is where I'm going to piss off a lot of Axanar and Star Trek purists. Prelude, and I dare say the hopefully to be one day finished Axanar films, is not lore-friendly. It's not even canon-friendly. For one, and this should be a major sticking point for real canon purists out there, but not for me personally because I couldn't give a damn, is the topic of female captains. Yes, Discovery haters, you can't hate on Discovery if you're going to let this pass as an acceptable reduction of canon for the sake of modern-day sensibilities. Your SJW arguments fall flat if you think for a moment that changing what was made abundantly clear in Turnabout Intruder, that women aren't allowed to captain a starship, is acceptable. Yes, I know they did it in Enterprise, but not one of you noticed, or even cared. So if you're okay with this retconning of Starfleet lore for the sake of modern-day culture, then I don't want to hear any more of your tight-lipped "this is against established canon" BS again. That really doesn't work for me. Again, like I said, Axanar is not canon. It's probably close to it, but one of the major complaints by writers of Axanar was that there were too many ships for the period. Of course, Alec Peters argues that a sci-fi movie about an epic space war would be pointless without lots of spaceships. And I have to admit, he's actually right. Once again, canon quite rightly has to give way to making a good product. And as much as I can fault Alec Peters for a lot of things, I really can't fault him for this. I can, however, fault Axanar fans who insist that this is as close to canon as you can get, for not being savvy enough to point out this liberty as a flaw in their idealistic vision of how Star Trek should be. So, all controversy aside, and believe me, there's a lot of that which I don't really need to repeat here, Prelude to Axanar is actually a pretty damn fine production, marred only by its hampered reputation, the division it has made in the fandom, and a producer who is more concerned with his personal reputation than actually working on the reputation he could gain from a finished product. When you constantly pick fights on your promotional Facebook page with other fan film producers, attack more successful and finished Star Trek fan films being more popular than your own, bring up the private lives of the people who used to work with you, or the people investigating the debacle you made out of this, then attack supporters who advise you to calm down and focus on finishing the actual production for a change of pace, one actually starts to wonder whether the actual Axanar film, which has been in constant production hell since the lawsuit, is something you actually plan to finish, or is just a popular demo reel upon which you intend to ride the wave until something better comes along. Prelude to Axanar showed promise. It still does, but not in the way Alec Peters would have you believe. If not for his insistence that it was an independent, fully fledged Star Trek movie with merchandise and an intent to make a profit from the studio he eventually tried and failed to set up, it would have been one of the best Star Trek films ever produced. And it was not a threat to CBS or Paramount as the supporters of Axanar would have you believe. The issue here was profiteering from an already licensed piece of work. I mean, come on, man, you don't pay yourself and your girlfriend a $38,000 salary if your intent is not to make money out of it. And you don't certainly pay out for a studio out of the $1.4 million you made from the crowdfunding to make a studio on the back of another intellectual property. But hey, the damage is done now, isn't it? New Star Trek fan films have been affected by Axanar's actions. That the owners allowed for licensing in the fan community at all, using James Corley's Phase 2 studio as an example, as well as fan movies within certain restricted guidelines, speaks greater volumes for the owners of Star Trek than it does for Alec Peters himself, who passively aggressively pushes his fan supporters to attack CBS and Paramount as the bullies in all of this because apparently they were afraid his ideas were better than his. So as much as I loved Prelude to Axanar, all I can say is this, and I'm laying down the gauntlet, Alec Peters, because I know for a fact you're watching this, your ego wouldn't demand any less. Cut the BS. Hunker down and get us the film you promised us. Because by now, if no one else can see you all talk, I can guarantee you the majority of us can, and we'll be looking at the disappointed faces of your supporters if you fail to deliver. Not with pride or arrogance, but with sorrow. You can either deliver or you can't. You can either sit behind that monitor and whine and moan about how everyone hates you, or get something done. It's up to you, because at the end of the day, it was that attitude that lost you my support. How long do you think it will be before everyone else cottons on to you? Still, like I said, I love Prelude to Axanar. It's actually worth a watch, maybe even your support. You can find the link to the movie below. But as the old saying goes, let the buyer beware. Until next time, ciao.